Howdy folks, we're going to talk a little bit about functions today. So let me start up a new project here. We'll call this one functions. Make sure we put it in our repository folder, in its own folder again. So we'll call this functions. So the functions project. Now there's a lot to functions that we're not necessarily going to get into. We only need some of it essentially here. So it's all good to know and definitely stuff to keep in your back pocket. But we're not going to practice all of it necessarily. So we got port 5080 for my machine, /functions, match the folder in htdocs, next, and finish. Now we've already done some functions before, right? It's not been too big of a deal for us to write a couple functions for these, right? So we can say, hey, I want a function here. Now what I want to show you is optional parameters, because these are super cool. So we looked at a couple functions in our database project where it was kind of tough to find users by just a name here, right? Because it was just giving us a big list here. So we'll say this will just be a find or list users function here. Then what I could do is I could say, hey, if I have a name, I'm going to default it to null. So if you give me a name, great, I'll take that name. If you don't give me a name, I'll assume it's null. So I can check, hey, if my name, and then we'd want to use the isSet. So if isSet name, so that's if name is not null here, right? So isSet is saying if not null here, and then we can do an else here, and this will be the must be null with an else here. So else name is null. So it's a little funky here that you have sort of a negative. So isSet is not null. Sure, I think that works out okay. It's just a little bit weird compared to what we're used to here. So if there is a name, then we only want to list the users with that given name. So we'll return an array of, and I'm just going to throw a name in here. Oh, sorry, that's a little loud. Wow, that I got my new phone and it is noisy. Let me put that in silent mode here because I thought I had that down, but that's okay. So we'll just return the name. Otherwise, if there wasn't just a name, we'll return an array and we'll put a couple names in here. We'll put in Eric and Jeb and Vivi. Just throw a couple names in here. So if I wanted to call that function, right, I can echo the results of that function if I wanted to. So we would say probably actually would print R. So we'll do a print R here because we'll print out that array of list users, and we'll say, hey, how about you give me the user Bob, and we'll see what we get here. And then we'll do another one where we just call list users with no argument. So if we don't give it an argument, name will be null. If we do give it an argument, name will be there. Let's give this a little run. Grab this one here. Oh, I didn't do any line breaks here, sorry. So the first one here, we just get Bob, and the next one here, we get Eric, Jeb, and Vivi, which is pretty cool. So we can use these optional parameters in some of our models here. So if we take a look, like our users model, list users gives me all of them. But when we went through and we wanted to find a particular user, I didn't have a way to do that. Right, we could add another function if we wanted to, like find single user might be an option there. But if we wanted, we could also then put in a username parameter here that defaults to null. So that's a pretty cool thing you can do with some of those functions. Let me grab, where was I looking at here? Back in NetBeans, there we go. So the default parameters are really cool, and you can have multiple arguments with default parameters. It's pretty neat here. There is a way in PHP you can force typing. I'm not a big fan of it here because it kind of goes against some of the PHP stuff, but you can read about that as well, which is fun. Let's grab our functions here. And then some other cool things, you can pass things by value or by reference. Now it's getting a little bit more complex than what we need here, but passing the value of something gives you a copy of it. Right? Passing the reference to it says this is where it lives in memory. So it can be useful so that you can modify particular values later on. So read about that. I'm not going to do any examples of it right now, but when we talk about classes in the next chapter, we'll look at some of those as well. All right, so that's some basics for functions. Again, go take a look at the chapter. There's a lot more to it here, but we don't necessarily need to practice all of it. It's not going to be super useful to us for our purposes. So we'll focus on just these optional parameters for now. All right, thanks, folks. I'll see you in the next video.